Now, joining us again on the phone line for a further discussion on this matter is political analyst Barry Kganyane. Mr. Kganyane, welcome again. I must say, the president of the African National Congress talks a good talk. I mean, he went on to define the volunteer, that they should work with no expectation to get tenders or government posts. But is that really the case at this point, if we had to talk about the cadre?
Yeah, good evening once again. Good evening to your viewers. Look, today's walkabout and engagement with, in particular, residents of Tembisa was somewhat of a confusing exercise for me in particular. One, you have a party that says it wants to remake itself, but it's quite interesting that they use a government platform to launch their campaign. I mean, for starters, if you want to give people houses, you do so in the name of government and not necessarily in the name of the party. But coming back straight to your question in terms of demanding the cadres of the movement, as it were, to be loyal, to be committed, to be staunch, dedicated members of the party, and to be selfless in the way they conduct themselves, it is somewhat of a tough ask at a time when so much has happened within the party. We're now living with the real experience and proof of the fact that there is divisions within the party, and at the same time, certain members of the party may very well find themselves being rewarded for being closer to the influence and the central power that be. So it's a tough ask to demand of the rank and file individual there to toe the line of being a loyalist at the same time finding comfort in the manner in which they discharge their duties.
But back to your first statement now, the confusion there, the conflation of party and state again. The ANC insists firstly that this was not part of electioneering. They're just simply fulfilling their political mandate to deliver services to the people. But, I mean, you had Gwen Ramaphosa as well. She's talking about health, and you would say, OK, you also happen to be an MEC of health. So, again, are you speaking as a party member? Because they sort of have an unfair advantage that here you're speaking and talking about the health system and how you go about fixing it. If Jack Bloom spoke, it really holds no water because, no, Jack Bloom, you're just a politician. You know, but here you've also got this person who governs or heads the portfolio, telling ordinary people that we will do this. Certainly, she has the power to.
Well, that analogy may very well hold water. But what is further disturbing is the fact that you are handing out title deeds, which in essence is nothing else but byproducts of a transaction that government has processed. Yes, I agree to the fact or the argument that that government is made up of a governing party called the ANC. But these title deeds are there because of taxpayers' money, and it's reflective of the collective good that has nothing to do with party affiliation nor allegiance to party politics. So it's quite disturbing to realize that once again this platform was used in the name of the party and not necessarily in the name of reaching out to everyone in an attempt to build nation building and provide service delivery.
But they're not the only ones, I must say, because we've also spoken about this issue in the Western Cape with the Democratic Alliance. Lots of time they confuse us all. You'd have Musi Maimane speaking on water, and then you remind yourself, no, he doesn't have a government position. So it seems most parties somehow cannot draw the line between what is the mandate of the party and what is the mandate of those within government.
Well, look, my take to this is perhaps it reflects the kind of society, politically speaking, that we have in this country. I mean, if you listened to Trevor Manuel yesterday, throwing the argument that as South Africans, we should by and large, let alone the party members, but as South Africans, we should by and large take responsibility for the rot that characterized Zuma's administration. Perhaps it is that seed that has been sown that says given the apathy that exists in the South African polity within society, there is no demand for accountability, there's no demand for questions, there's no demand for our rights. We allow politicians to manipulate the system pretty much to their advantage and less so to the electorate as well as residents and service users and receivers. It is high time that we educate our people. This is how politics work. And if we don't do that, I'm afraid our democracy will not progress the way we want, and we'll end up with some redundant system called South African state as well as a dispensation.
Mm-hmm. No, it is unfortunate when you speak of the electorate, because in most cases, they're very grateful, forgetting that it's actually their money, that if they are being serviced well, if they're getting RDP houses, there's better quality within the health system, they would mostly say that, no, we're grateful, and we don't want to be causing problems or complaining, because some of them don't fully acknowledge that actually you have placed these certain individuals to actually look after your funds. We all collectively contribute to this money that is then distributed, or how they're going to administer our funds.
True that. But let's assume on the one hand that the narrative that a certain section of the governing party constituency, and that is of course your middle class African national supporters, chose not to vote for the party in the past 2016 local government elections. If that narrative is true, scientifically and otherwise, it's beginning to tell us something, that there's a certain section of society that is aware of what is going on around them. And surely they are able to respond, sadly or fortunately, depending on which side of the fence you are beginning to vote with their feet. But is this that we want to see in respect of our democracy thriving? We want full participation. We want our democracy to grow. We want everybody else to have a say on matters of government in this country. So surely educating our people is important, but at the same time, respecting the people's rights should be the prerogative of this government.
Mm-hmm. Now, talking about the 2016 local government elections, Ekurhuleni is the only Gauteng metro that the ANC governs. Could that be an indication of what we should expect in 2019 now? Or many people, particularly the black middle class and the colored vote, could be caught up in the Ramaphosa, as many say? I mean, we saw what happened at Sona. I mean, people had a swing in their step. They were also happy, and South Africans were united, black and white alike. So do you see them perhaps recovering in that respect following the change of leadership?
Look, let's be honest to ourselves. Ramaphosa has come and gone. It's time now to deal with real issues, the so-called realpolitik. The Northwest on its own has given us that strong indication that, look, the honeymoon that Ramaphosa wanted, he got, it's over. It's time now to deal with real issues. And sadly, from time to time, real issues will pop up there and there from one province to the other. He will have to deal with this plethora of challenges and problems that some are complicated, some are easily dealt with through delegation of certain members from the Luthuli House, if not certain members from Parliament, let alone the executive. It will stretch his leadership. It will question his credibility. It will question men and women who surround him every day, be it in the executive, be it in the Luthuli House. Whether he will manage this crisis going forward before 2019, it's anybody's guess. Mm-hmm. From time to time, things happen. As other people say, a day in politics sounds like 100 days, if not 5 years or more. So we will have to wait and see whether he has the mettle to deal with these issues, whether his leadership is blessed with loyal men and women who want to back him up and make sure that the governing party, together with government, succeed in promoting a better life for all.
Mm-hmm. Now, some have gone on to say that 2019 will be the year of coalitions, but some might beg to differ because they say studies have showed that governing parties always have a greater chance of winning elections. What's your take?
Look, let me also answer the past question, part of it, and this question at once. If you take Ekurhuleni, for instance, we know ANC did not win outright. they still owe the promises they gave to the Matatiele civic organization. Much the same with Nelson Mandela Bay, much the same with Johannesburg, and of course Tshwane. So going to 2019, the kingmakers, in this instance the EFF, being at the top ladder of kingmaking, would want to bargain, would want to use their position to influence politics of coalition. Whether the other major parties, i.e. ANC and DA, will play to the tune or not, that remains to be seen. Already the EFF is saying, if you don't agree with us on the amendment of Section 25 as a precondition to giving you our support, already there will be issues. So whether they are going to use this as a bargaining tool again in 2019, let's watch this space.
And then as to the choice, I mean, they've got their head of elections, Fikile Mbalula. He's Mr. Cool. Everybody knows him. Everybody loves him. But what we've come to realize that contrary to what many believed, that we've got a youth that is apolitical. They care nothing about politics. We've got a very conscious youth. They know what they want. They probably know more what they want than the older generation because, you know, they tolerate certain things. The young people don't tolerate anything. So do you think the whole approach of perhaps festivals and the dabbings and the everything will really, you know, take off with the youth at this time, or you really need to speak to the issues of unemployment? They want to be part of this economy. They're sitting on the streets, trying to hustle here and there. Do you think you have festivals for them at this time, or you decide to really engage them meaningfully?
No, you've got to really engage them. Remember, that particular youth is further divided into segments. You've got the unemployed youth. You've got youth in universities, for instance, who are still, by and large, unsatisfied with the way government responded to their plight and demands. Hashtag trees must fall. In my own analysis, that campaign should not have been there in the first place had we had a government that is able to listen and respond to the plight of the youth, especially those in universities today. But outside of that, we haven't created employment enough for them to be absorbed into the market, into the labor market. So it's a bit of a problem. Sitting with the stats as we have now, what other solutions do we have for those who are jobless, those whose future is uncertain? So you've got to respond to these segments individually and make sure that the cries and the plight of each segment is addressed independently, given peculiarities and nuances that defines those segments.
And then to the possibilities in these coalitions, we've got the EFF. Are they more likely to perhaps enter into some sort of an agreement with the ANC? Because if you talk about their commander-in-chief, he has strict demand. He has certain demands. And in most cases, you know, if you accede to those demands, you look weak at times, you know? So do you see the ANC actually entering into some sort of an agreement if they don't fare so well come 2019? Or perhaps they'll be arrogant and rather even go and perhaps enter into an agreement with the DA?
Well, it's difficult to predict and calculate that. Remember, one moment the EFF claims that the ANC needs to evolve and be a party for the people with less corrupt leaders. It must come clean and all of that. It's a tough ask currently. Look at the top NEC members. To borrow the language used within the governing party, how many skeletons are in the closet? Who in the NEC can come out and say there are no allegations against me, proven or not, I'm clean? The EFF would want to play those cards openly and say, give us a clean government, give us a track record. So from time to time, these conditions will keep on shifting. And I don't think the ANC is in a position right now to meet at least the majority of these conditions.
2019 will certainly be difficult, but on to something that coincidentally occurred, the burning of the shacks. Ramaphosa went on to speak about the burning of that shack and went on to say that he wants to in fact do away with squatter camps, you know. He spoke of the process of rapidly finding land. He has now asked within the government of the province to say, please, you need to identify land, we need to move faster. But again, great intentions, is it doable?
Look, outside of the rhetoric, which I suspect characterized political activities today surrounding him in particular, I find this difficult. At a time when our economy in particular is not doing well, who are we to divorce economic capacity that is needed by government and the public service to ensure that there is equitable and quality service delivery? We have serious problems in that domain. Had it been that we are not experiencing issues of state capture, corruption, a current account deficit in our fiscus, one would then argue to say perhaps we have the means to provide accessible, equitable, and quality services. We don't have, and it's dangerous to walk the old path of making promises when we know that the capacity to respond to the issue of land, equally so urban housing, is largely dependent on availability of the fiscus, which, by the way, is not in good shape.
And then just lastly, his leadership, because some have been sympathetic to say, you know what, there's just too many problems. You know, these issues are so complex that perhaps even if he wanted to display some great leadership, it becomes hard in such a time or in these type of circumstances. What's your take?
Yeah, not true. I mean, for the mere fact that today the executive is made up of a few, and I'm saying this to qualify it, a few men and women who hold credibility, tells a story on its own. If you take Pravin Gordhan, who is seen by so many people in this country and elsewhere as at least one person who can yield a sense of respect and integrity in the public service, that kind of movement is highly needed. But these are few men and women. Ramaphosa must be surrounded by a majority of men and women who are able to give him support, give him advice, give him counseling as and when he needs it, and of course on their own right be able to manage certain portfolios and the politics around those portfolios very well. Unfortunately, the track record doesn't give us that kind of evidence that we want. If you take social development, for instance, there are still issues. Those who inherited that portfolio, Shabangu in this instance, it has to battle old transactions that were done illegally and put that house in order. Much the same with Gwen Ramaphosa in Gauteng Health Department. There's issues there. Will she be able to tackle that alone or with few people who are credible around him? Serious governance issues in this country belie in front of this administration.
I know I'd said that was the last question, but just one last one. Following up from your statement there, when you're going to mention names about politicians who have conducted themselves well. We've got a disillusioned society here that says at this point, politicians are politicians. We're seeing what's happening now in Tshwane, where we had a chief of staff. They no longer know what to believe, that you would think maybe certain political parties have disciplined or principled leaders, but then people now are saying, you know what, politicians will be politicians. You have maybe in the African National Congress, some that benefited a long time ago, where they sat on various boards. They were politicians. They were deployed to certain companies. They became members of boards. And then from there on, they made millions. They drive around in fancy cars today, and they're intellectuals. And then again, you had a different situation where you've got what they call RET these days. You find sometimes they are taking away a white company to put in a black company. But again, it's an exclusive or elite grouping, all in the name of transformation again. So there's these two groupings. So you've got society that watches on and says, in all these instances, we get nothing. You know, we're the biggest losers and politicians can fight each other. So what do you make of that when you have a disillusioned society that says we actually don't believe in politicians anymore?
Two things, Namfunda, in this respect. Let us acknowledge and give respect to the role that civil society broadly in South Africa is playing. I think they're doing a good job. They're in the forefront as agents of demanding accountability and ensuring that we at the end have a government that is answerable to the people first before answering whatever issues to themselves. And they see themselves in the good light of some kind of pseudo-political righteousness. thank goodness we have a good civil society organization and the culture thereof that goes on in this country. But secondly, we have a very strong judiciary. I know I might be raising issues here that other people are not comfortable with. They still see our judiciary as somewhat of a captured entity within the state. I have hope, I have confidence in the manner in which the judiciary in this country has conducted itself. It has given light to our democracy. It has given strength to men and women out there who still hold their heads up high and demand what is good in this country. Mm-hmm. With these two issues at hand, I think we can go further to encourage some measure of involvement, some hope in our people, and ensure that our democracy thrives at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. No, we certainly hope that ordinary citizens will decide to take up the good fight themselves, because at the end of the day, apartheid was abolished, or at least was defeated by ordinary citizens. Professor, thank you very much for your time, as always. That's political analyst Professor Berihanyane talking to us following today's Thuma Mina campaign that was unveiled by President Cyril Ramaphosa and the African National Congress.